Shana Tova. My name is Laurie Devry, and I am a co-president of Havurah Shalom, along with Ben Walters. We are so happy to have all of you with us to usher in the new year. Like last year, we are seeing all your faces on Zoom instead of in person. And though we miss the human connection that are unique to in-person gatherings, we are grateful in the second year of the pandemic for the technology that allows us to gather safely in community. We are grateful to be collected in this amazing virtual space, which was put together by a creative team of talented staff and dedicated volunteers. We welcome each of you here tonight, whether you are a longtime member, a relative newcomer, or someone from the greater community who is joining us for the first time to usher in the new year. We're so pleased that you found us in our virtual Cvent tent. Each year, Havurah Shalom chooses a theme for the year to help unify and guide us. This year's theme is Shlemut Veshaver, wholeness and brokenness. Tradition tells us that for the entire journey in the wilderness, alongside the second set of tablets bearing the 10 Commandments, our ancestors also carried the fragments of the first set, which Moses had previously smashed. This image reminds us to make room for the broken along with the whole. In times like this, it is easy to look around and only see what is broken. Our democracy feels frail. Climate change is bringing unprecedented disruption and destruction all over the world. Human conflict and violence are on the rise. And of course, the pandemic has created frightening new levels of chaos, death, and institutional mistrust. How can this seemingly unfixable brokenness ever become a foundation for healing and regeneration? How do we find pathways to wholeness in this fractured world? For me, Havurah is one of my paths to wholeness, one of my sources of strength and healing. Gathering as a community with Havurah gives me a sense of wholeness. I believe we are stronger as a group than we are as individuals, and that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. How does Havurah face this world of brokenness? How have we created wholeness in this fractured world, and how do we continue to do that going forward? One example of wholeness that I have felt is the sense of community we have managed to cultivate in this virtual world. Looking back on these past months of physical separation, I marvel at how connected I can feel through these virtual gatherings. Of course, it is not the same as physical proximity, but it is a substitute that has worked pretty well. Looking ahead, we ask ourselves, how will we ever gather safely again in person? How will we forge wholeness out of brokenness? How will we ever establish guidelines that make us feel safe and secure? One thing I learned in our community forums and from the feedback that we got in connection with the masking proposals under consideration before the Delta variant broke out is that we have very different gathering comfort levels. What makes me feel safe may not make you feel safe. The protocol that feels sensible and appropriate to one member is inappropriate and unacceptable to another. There is no Venn diagram where we all intersect on common ground. Whatever gathering protocol is eventually established will leave some of you unhappy and dissatisfied. Will this cause fracture? Maybe. Can we find wholeness alongside those fractures? Hopefully, yes. Havurah leadership is committed to listening, hearing, and explaining. As we move forward, we will make our process and decision-making as transparent as possible. By doing this and by sharing the science and values we turn to in making our decision, we hope to come to a place of wholeness. We are likely still many weeks, if not months, away from gathering in person together in our building. But that day will come, and when it does, we will look around the room, shoulder to shoulder with our fellow Havurahniks, and say to ourselves, how do we fit into this space? We've grown, we're tripping all over each other. Did you see the line to the restroom? Oy vey. Which leads me to my next example of wholeness emerging from brokenness. As you have read in Hinenu and Hakol, last month the steering committee voted yes to accepting Space Jam Committee's recommendation to move forward with building expansion plans. Steering agreed that we should stay in our current location and either build up or, if suitable space can be found, purchase a nearby annex to expand our space. Either way, it is a commitment to move forward with exploring a capital campaign, identifying funding options, undertaking construction planning, engaging in member outreach, gathering additional community input, and taking the next steps towards expanding our space so that it can accommodate our growing congregation. This was a vote for coming together as a community to maintain our wholeness and start the process of expanding our space to meet our needs. I look forward to working with all of you on this endeavor. Though imperfect, I do find wholeness in gathering together virtually, and I hope you do too. Whether you are a member of Havurah, a high holiday regular, or a first timer joining us, we hope you will find our high holiday services meaningful and uplifting. We also hope that you realize that keeping these services open to the community at large comes at a high cost to our Havurah community, both in terms of the bottom line and volunteer time. But we're so happy to do this year after year. And while we aren't paying for rental space this year, the costs associated with bringing us all together on this virtual platform are still significant. Whether you are a member or a guest, please join us in the mitzvah of making these services a reality by making a generous contribution that fits your budget. There are donation links on the CVent platform pages and at havurahshalom.org. Or you can send a check the old-fashioned way. As we enter this time of joy and introspection, please join me in gratitude for all that we have to look forward to and the hard work that will help get us there. Let me conclude by wishing you all Shana Tova Umuteka, a sweet, good, happy, healthy New Year. Chag Sameach.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. On page 39 in your songbooks, Wings of Peace. Ufros aleinu, Sukkot Shalom, Shalom. Spread over us wings of peace. Shalom. Draw water in joy from the living well. Draw water in joy from the living well. Waters of life, Shalom. Ufros aleinu, Sukkot Shalom, Shalom. Limnot Yameinu is on page 25 in your songbooks.
Limnot Yameinu, Limnot Yameinu, Limnot Yameinu ken hoda v'navi levav chochma. Limnot Yameinu ken hoda v'navi levav chochma. Teach us to treasure each day. Teach us to treasure each day, that we may open our hearts to your wisdom. Teach us to treasure each day, that we may open our hearts to your wisdom. Teach us to treasure each day.
525,600 minutes. 525,000 moments so dear. 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? In daylights, in sunsets, in midnights, in cups of coffee, in inches, in miles, in laughter, in strife, in 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year in a life? Measure in love, measure in love, measure in love, and treasure each day, treasure each day, treasure each day. Limnot yameinu, limnot yameinu, limnot yameinu ken hoda v'navi levav chochma. Limnot yameinu ken hoda v'navi levav chochma. Treasure each day. Teach us to treasure each day. Treasure each day. Teach us to treasure each day. Treasure each day. Teach us to treasure each day. Treasure each day. Teach us to treasure each day.
Shana Tova, and welcome, and thank you wherever you are right now out there as I work to feel your presence. Thank you for bearing with us and for being here. However many of you are here and sticking it out and with us, it is a joy to be with you, even sensing energetically your presence. I want to thank Rachel Pollock, our office and facilities manager, for getting on it and making the connections that she needed to make this right and for us to be together. I feel like we're doing a mashup of Rent and Limnot Yameinu, and anything's possible, you know? What can stop us? As we begin this year, as we emerge from 5781 into 5782, and the shofar blast that you just heard, maybe some of you know this, and some of you maybe you're a little confused of why that is. And it is maybe it's a new tradition. It was Eileen's idea, actually, and a really beautiful one, or maybe it's a one-time thing. But it felt necessary somehow. And as I thought about it and reflected on it in the days leading up, that question that I come to a lot during this time of year arose for me: what's needed? What's needed? What's really needed right now? And I want to invite that for each of us, that question, to ask each of us to consider, what do I need of these days, of these 10 days of tshuva, of returning? What do we need in community? What do we need in the world? And maybe the shofar has sounded for us because one of the things we definitely need is to widen our gates a little more. Maybe that's what I'm hearing in the shofar blast, to make sure that no one who wants to pass through these gates is left behind. So I want to echo Larie's words and really say welcome, members and non-members old-timers and newcomers, Jews and non-Jews, seekers and skeptics, people of every racial, cultural, ethnic identity, those who are rich, those who are poor, trans and cisgendered, queer and straight, folks across the range of physical ability and disability, whoever we are and however we arrive, may we each feel ourselves welcomed through these gates. May we each feel welcome to come just as we are. And in the spirit of welcome and beginning and acknowledging our presence here, I'd like to offer these words acknowledging the original people of this land. Havurah Shalom in Portland, Oregon and Multnomah County rests on the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Cowlitz bands of Chinookan peoples, the Tualatin, Kalapuya, the Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. Today, people from these bands are part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, as well as the Chinook Nation and Cowlitz Nations in Washington State. We acknowledge the ancestors and survivors of this place and recognize the sacrifices forced upon them. We honor their legacy, their lives, and their descendants who carry on their tribal traditions for present and future generations. We acknowledge that it is our collective responsibility to critically examine the colonial histories as well as the current implications of systemic oppression. We understand that it is our responsibility to learn more about the original people of this land. And the original peoples of this land have practiced their rituals and traditions here for many generations. And so as we, in Havurah Shalom, we as Jews enter our most sacred season and practice our rituals and traditions, we do so in solidarity and kinship with all those whose celebrations of their tribal ways long predated us on this land. Welcome, Shana Tova. I turn to Margie, who will light the candles, if you'd like to follow along the blessings on page 28.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner Shel Yom Tov.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheanu v'kiyamanu v'higyanu lazman hazeh.
Amen.
Lev Tahor can be found on page 24 in your songbooks. Lev Tahor berali Elohim Veruach nachon chadesh b'kirbi Lev tahor
I'm Robert Trachtenberg, and I'm going to read an excerpt from a translation by Miriam Waddington of a Yiddish poem by J.I. Siegel. On rainy days, I can sit down beside the window and think about an old wayside inn and how a cart full of Hasidim. Actually, to provide a better connection for this audience, I'm going to restart the poem and change or retranslate 4 words. In terms of this year's theme, I'm breaking the wholeness of the translation, and we'll see what happens. On rainy days, I can sit down beside the window and think about an old wayside inn and how a carpool from Havurah drove up there late one night and changed the simple inn to a beautiful palace, and how the small band of faithful sat around the wooden table as radiant as if they were gathered in the corridors of heaven.
As we move into the Baruch Hu, which can be found in your Machzor, page 62, I offer by way of kavanah, by way of intention, an invitation for each of us to contemplate as we move through these gates together, what will support me in this moment to feel welcomed in more fully, just as I am. And maybe there's someone in my life whom I'm imagining, or maybe just something, some resource that I can draw from. And then imagining as well someone whose hand I want to reach for, to welcome them in and make sure they know they belong as we move through. So maybe taking that moment and dedicating this Baruch Hu to someone who you want to bring along with you. Page 62, the Baruch Hu.
Lie, 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 lie. Ya, lie, 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 lie. Ya, lie, 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 lie. Ya, lie, lie, lie. Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Umavir yom, umevil laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo. El chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed. Yai da dai 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 dai. Yai da dai 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 dai. Yai da dai dai dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Baruch atah Adonai Hamariv Aravim.
Amen. A poem by Jan Richardson, Blessing for the Brokenhearted. Let us agree for now that we will not say, the breaking makes us stronger, or that it is better to have this pain than to have done without this love. Let us promise we will not tell ourselves time will heal the wound when every day our waking opens it anew. Perhaps for now, it can be enough to simply marvel at the mystery of how a heart so broken can go on beating, as if it were made for precisely this, as if it knows the only cure for love is more of it, as if it sees the heart's sole remedy for breaking is to love still, as if it trusts that its own persistent pulse is the rhythm of a blessing we cannot begin to fathom, but will save us nonetheless.
אהבת עולם, בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו למדת. אהבת עולם, בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 ya, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la la la, ya la
The Shema can be found on page 76. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך. ושינתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך. וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם במזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
We turn now to Hashkivenu, which you can find in the songbooks on page 15. May we each receive the protection that we need. May all beings everywhere receive the care and protection they need.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom V'hamidenu Malkeinu L'chaim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom V'hamidenu Malkeinu L'chaim Ufros aleinu Sukat shlomecha V'taknenu B'etzat tova milfanecha V'hoshienu leman shemecha Hashkivenu Adonai Ufros aleinu Sukat shlomecha V'taknenu B'etzat tova milfanecha V'hoshienu leman shemecha Hashkivenu Adonai Baruch atah Adonai Haporei sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim ve'al kol ha'olam Hashkivenu Adonai Hashkivenu Adonai Hashkivenu Adonai Tiku v'chodesh shofar B'kesel yom chageinu Ki chok li'Yisrael hu Mishpat le'Elohei Yaakov.
We live life like a roller coaster. With ups and downs, slow and fast, it's easy to get lost in the moment. We get lost in what we feel or what we felt in the last past. But sometimes we need to look at the whole roller coaster of life to understand what those ups and downs mean. A slow uphill battle can leave us feeling empty and broken. We get lost in that feeling all too easily, forgetting to look ahead and forgetting to look at what's right in front of you. Brokenness and wholeness build on each other and couldn't exist without one another. In that slow uphill climb or shattered heart, there is always a reprieve waiting for us at the end. But that reprieve couldn't exist without the brokenness to fix in the first place. When we are broken, it is a time to heal and grow. We must appreciate those sad times just as much as the good to truly be happy. There have been times when I have felt this way too. For instance, when I was first starting my transition, all I could think about was how hard it was and the pain I felt in the moment from not being able to see myself in the broken mirror. But what saved me was the realization that things would be different soon, and letting people and things affect how I was feeling then would ultimately hold me back from being happy as I am. Now I consider myself more whole because of this. If I hadn't learned the lesson, I don't think I'd have been able to fix myself and be whole today. This is what I think Shlema the Shivar means. To live in the cycle of brokenness and wholeness is to live in and out of the moment, appreciating every piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Al, for those words, for that message. And as we go into our first Amidah, our first private moments of these days of tshuva, of these days of turning, by way of invitation, maybe somewhere to begin is reflect on a way in which I aspire to be more fully myself in the year to come, and or a way in which I can enable or support someone else to be fully themselves, most fully themselves in the year to come. So we'll have just a few moments for our Amidah period after the Chatzi Kaddish, which we'll turn to next on page 100. And then if you want to use the words in the Sidur, the Machzor rather, for the Amidah, they begin on 104. And then on page 127 and following is some alternatives, or you can simply use that reflection I offered or offer whatever prayers upon your heart. Chatzi Kaddish, page 100.
יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב וימרו אמן. יש מרבה מברך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדע ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודשה בריחו לילה לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה דוש בחטא ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא דמירן בעלמא וימרו אמן.
Shalom Aleinu.
ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן. יאללה לה 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 לה, יאללה לה לה לה, יאללה לה 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 לה לה, יאללה לה 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 לה, יאללה לה 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 לה. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן. יאללה לה 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 לה, יאללה לה לה לה, יאללה לה 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 לה לה, יאללה לה 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 לה לה, יאללה לה 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 לה, יאללה לה 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 לה.
Shana Tova. I have an indelible image from my childhood, a photograph, a picture that I saw somewhere of Mother Teresa carrying a young child whose legs were kind of hanging over her arms. The child did not look at all well. And this image has returned to me in recent days. Feels like an emblem of what it looks like to come in close with brokenness, for and to love in the broken places. Before I say more, I want to hold up the question, what do we mean when we say the word brokenness? One thing I'm appreciating about this theme is that it's so multifaceted. There are so many faces of brokenness, so many ways in which we can use that word, so many ways in which we can have it mean. And in working with it so far, I'm seeing things already in new ways. Reading some of the mini drashot, I'm feeling invited and challenged to go further in and expand my understanding and experience of what it means when we use the word brokenness and the word wholeness. And so I invite you to receive what I offer this evening in the spirit of dialogue. Maybe some of what I say will feel affirming to you, or maybe some will be challenging, and that's great. My hope is that we'll be in conversation with one another somehow over these holidays, but really throughout the year to deepen our understanding and discern how best to respond and work with the brokenness in our lives and in our world. God willing, pointing toward wholeness for ourselves and for our loved ones, for all those who are oppressed and marginalized, for our planet and for the entire world. I'll begin with the brokenness that we each experience at various points in our lives, simply on account of being human. On a very personal level, each of us in unique ways, but each of us experiencing brokenness, losing loved ones, illness, injury, lost dreams, struggles, defeats in relationship and work, the broken heart. And right now, coming on 18 months of the pandemic, I'd venture to say we're all carrying brokenness with us in some way or another, in our families, our workplaces, our hopes and visions, our sense of safety or sense of well-being. And it might manifest as anxiety or fear or exhaustion or despair, aimlessness or confusion or something else, whatever it is. Let's begin. Let's begin there by beholding it and meeting it with compassion, with care, each of us arriving here with all the cracked and fragmented pieces that we bear. Hinenu, here we are. And part of the challenge we face in working with brokenness is that we live in a culture obsessed with wholeness, not actual wholeness, but the appearance of wholeness, the image of wholeness, of our having our act together, of everything fitting perfectly, bottled up and posted on Instagram. Even our vulnerabilities performed smoothly. And this is not to disparage anyone or really any of those platforms. It's the culture that we all inhabit and often, in spite of ourselves, participate in. But true, real brokenness, genuine wholeness are something different. That poem that I read before the Shema, I think really speaks to this. I'll read just a little bit of it again. Let us agree for now that we will not say the breaking makes us stronger, or that it is better to have this pain than to have done without this love. There's something here about the ways in our culture that we are asked to force wholeness, that even amid heartbreaking loss, we're supposed to go right to how it will make us better, be for the best. Thankfully, our tradition challenges this model. Particularly in our rituals of death and mourning, we're encouraged to encounter loss directly, surround ourselves by loving support that will enable us to be present in it and not repress it or escape it. And we can bring this wisdom with us into grief of any form, into the varieties of brokenness that we experience. When I was in rabbinical school, one year I had an internship at a shul, at a community, about half dozen visits throughout the year, and I would go and teach on Shabbat and lead some things and shadow the clergy. And the cantor there, one of the weekends I was there on a Sunday, was going to visit a community member in the hospital, invited me to come along with, and I went with him. And as soon as we walked into the room, we could see that this man was really in quite amount of pain. He was an older man, and I don't remember exactly what was happening with him, but he had really difficulty swallowing and sores, and it was clear that he was profoundly uncomfortable and in a great deal of pain. And this very kind, very sweet cantor, also a young person at the time, went and had a wonderful rapport, light rapport, and sort of started off with a banter and kind of small talk for the first 5 minutes, and first 10 minutes and 15 and 20, and sort of stayed in that kind of, light banter and back and forth. And at the time I was doing what's called a CPE unit, a unit of clinical pastoral education, intensive training, really in accompanying those and people in suffering, in difficulty, in hospitals and elsewhere. And in a lull in the conversation, I just stepped in and said the man's name and said, how's it going? It seems pretty rough. And he turned, he hadn't really looked at me, he turned and he looked me right in the eyes and nodded and said, yeah, it really is. And went on to share. And I don't remember so much what he said or I said back, and I remember we said a prayer and that was it. And on the ride away from the hospital, the cantor said to me, commented on how much the energy really shifted just by that simple question. I did not, it was not like I had profound skills or anything at that point. I was really kind of stepping in and learning in this work. And there was just something about the fact that the brokenness that he was experiencing, I think, was being seen, that he was freed in some way from needing to act out some illusion of wholeness. This is not about glorifying or idealizing suffering in any way. It's about authenticity and wholeheartedness. Not turning, not hiding, not covering over, not rushing to put the pieces back together artificially. The detail about the broken tablets that you may probably have seen, if you haven't seen in the description of our theme for the year, that the broken tablets also carried along in the ark, and Larry mentioned this as well. It's not actually in the text of the Torah. It's based on a verse from Deuteronomy that says, I will inscribe on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets that you broke, and you shall place them in the ark. The surface meaning is clear. You shall place them, that is, the new tablets, in the ark. But the sages saw a window there. They read it like this: I will inscribe on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, and you shall place them, all of them, that is, the second whole tablets and the first broken ones, in the ark. And it became part of the lexicon. It became part of this thing that's just known and really assumed that it's there, and part of the journey that the children of Israel carried the broken tablets along with the whole. And I think because it feels so true and so right and so compelling, and it's like, of course they did. Of course they carried the fragments along with the whole tablets. And there are several other midrashim, rabbinic teachings, that play with that image, and they hold it up in slightly different ways. And what's not there in the sources is any midrash in which the broken tablets put themselves back together and become whole. Nowhere in that thread does tradition force the brokenness into wholeness. It was simply, these are also sacred. These ones too need to be tended. Karov Adonai l'nishbarei lev. Psalm 34, God is near to the brokenhearted. God is near to the brokenhearted, not we get close to God through suffering. Rather, God isn't only present with what we generally consider wholeness and triumph, that there too, and there specifically in the broken places, that what we mean, if we mean anything when we say that word God, is a caring and loving presence, a caring and loving life force who or which is actually drawn toward the hurt places. Love the broken places. Love the broken places is a phrase that has emerged for me in this. Not in the sense of, I love this is for the best, but love in the sense of give love. Give love in the broken places. Give love to the broken places. The way we love a dear friend or a child when they are suffering. We love them with all we can in their having to face brokenness. We give them the fullness of our love where and when they need it most. As we scan a fuller picture of what we mean by brokenness, we must recognize that not everyone is equally vulnerable to it. There is human-inflicted brokenness manifesting in all kinds of ways on a societal level that causes sustained harm to some much more than to others. Some of us take for granted certain kinds of wholeness, insulation from this kind of brokenness that many people don't have the luxury of accessing. The pandemic, as I mentioned, has been difficult, challenging for all of us in some way. For my family, on a very personal level, this has been a very hard year for each of us. And that's real. And we have steady income, paying our mortgage every month, staying home and safe as much as we need to while still working, our kids connected electronically as much as they need to be. Climate change, it is close to home, and it is heartbreaking and terrifying for all of us. And we see again and again, and we will continue to see, with fires, with flooding, with heat, with drought, poorer communities of color, by and large, consistently face the gravest consequences. And globally, all the more so. Each year, the numbers of climate refugees climbing. And of course, many of our hearts and souls right now with people in Texas, women and people of any gender with a uterus, such a horrific brokenness, this violation of freedom and access to health and safety, impacting so many people. And we know this will come down hardest on people who are poorest, on people of color and immigrants more than on others. And these are but a few examples of the ways in which brokenness gets shaped and funneled by the inequitable systems that frame our society. None of this is brokenness we should ever accept as what it means to be human. And here too, we can and must love in the broken places. Giving love here means working with all we have to end the harm that breaks bodies and communities and livelihoods, and fighting for wholeness, restoration, for freedom and transformation that ends these harms. In certain instances, some of us, among us here, are impacted and harmed directly. And in other instances, we may be complicit. And there are ways in which some of us have inflicted harm. So when I say loving and honoring the broken places, for me, so much of that is being clear and honest with myself about where I am in regard to any example of brokenness. There's a Leonard Cohen lyric that has been speaking to me in this regard, and it's not the classic verse from Anthem about the crack in everything, which I am sure we will hear at some point during these days. But it's another one that's been following me around. It's from Bird on a Wire. But I swear by this song and by all that I have done wrong. I've been so captivated by that image of swearing by all that I've done wrong. Wouldn't our mistakes or faults be things we specifically would not swear on? But I think what Leonard Cohen is naming is that there is sanctity there. In certain contexts, maybe more sanctity there than in what we have done right. Not certainly in the impact of what we did, but in what we have done wrong. If we recognize it and meet it truthfully and compassionately, there is a need, there is a demand even for open-heartedness, humility, learning, growth. If we seriously engage with others in relationship and community, we will make mistakes and we will cause harm. To swear by all we have done wrong, I think, is to commit to not turning away from that, to not running from the brokenness we have caused, to turn toward it, to tend it, for the safety and well-being of those we have hurt, and in order to help transform the conditions that allow that harm to happen. Which brings us to one more face of brokenness that I'd like to hold up. And that is when brokenness or breaking is a necessary step on the path toward liberation and a truer wholeness. One of the midrashim, the rabbinic teachings about the broken tablets that I mentioned, is a sage, Reish Lakish, who asks, what is the meaning of that which is stated, the first tablets that you broke? What does that verse mean? And the Hebrew of that you broke is asher shibarta. And he plays with that word asher, which sounds like the word yishar. And so he says, yishar kochacha, which we know better as yashar koach, which means good job or good on you. We say it after someone leads prayer or gives a teaching. He says, yishar kochacha sheshibarta, that what God is saying to Moses is, Yashar Koach, that you broke the tablets. Good on you for breaking them. I love this. The tablets needed to be broken, the teaching is saying. Maybe the people weren't ready to receive them. Maybe they would have become another idol, something to cling to as an object rather than a guiding inspiration for right living. There are times, this teaching is telling us, there are times when things that seem essential, sacred even, need to break. Miriam Kaba is a leader in the movement for prison abolition, to end the carceral system as we know it. And she speaks about creative destruction. She offers this. While some people might think of abolition as primarily a negative project, let's tear everything down and hope for the best, it's actually, she says, a vision of a restructured society in a world where we have everything we need: food, shelter, education, health, art, beauty, clean water, and more things that are foundational to our personal and communal safety. It focuses in part on building a society where it is possible to address harm without relying on structural forms of oppression or the violent systems that increase it. In movements like that for prison abolition and others working to dismantle harmful structures, there's a light that's being shined in what I think we could call false wholeness. Systems and institutions professing to keep us whole while systematically and repeatedly inflicting brokenness, particularly on marginalized communities. Like a seed coat which must crack to enable germination, there are structures whose dismantling makes way for new life. And this is true on intimate levels as well as societal. Sometimes relationships need to break. Work commitments, ways of perceiving and understanding our lives and the world. And the breaking is often scary. By definition, it is destabilizing and unsettling. But returning to that phrase, loving the broken places, giving love in the broken places, a central question that arises for me is, how do we enact the breaking from a place of love? In the name of drawing us further into relationship and connection in ways that facilitate greater access to wholeness, health, and freedom for ourselves, for our loved ones, for all those who are repeatedly denied these rights. What I hope to have offered tonight are some pathways into practice for understanding and working with brokenness. And I don't think that these various faces of brokenness that I've mentioned are truly separate from one another. Each of us is located differently on the various continuums between privilege and oppression. But wherever we each are in any given context, how does touching in with our own brokenness aid us in attuning and attending to the brokenness of others? How can my experiences of loss and instability become portals to move closer toward the brokenness of those who face much worse than I do? Rather than our own vulnerabilities and struggles keeping us from engaging with the vulnerabilities of the world, what are the practices and supports we need so that they can actually be a gateway in? Torah offers the repeated instruction to circumcise our hearts, to circumcise our hearts. And in whatever form brokenness takes, the capacity to be open-hearted is something we need to cultivate. Our work in community, then, is to create and nurture enough safety so that each of us can show up with open hearts. And in society, to break down all that is inflicting harm so that each person, every person, is free to open their hearts and nurture wholeness within themselves and in relationship with others. Being open-hearted, which often means being broken-hearted, is a delicate endeavor. But it is a vessel through which we can learn new ways of caring for one another and the world we have been granted to steward. Let us take our love into the broken places. May we find one another there. Shana Tova Tikatevu. May we each be inscribed this year in all the ways we need for wholeness, for safety, and for love.
אחת שאלתי מאת אדוני אותה
We turn now to the Mourner's Kaddish, which you can find in the Machzor on page 1216. I invite anyone who is saying Kaddish, whether you're in mourning or observing a yortzeit, to, if you'd like, you can share the name of the person you're remembering in the chat, or just say their name aloud, or just hold their name in your hearts. I invite you to say Kaddish with me, page 1216. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah,
Amen.
Bi'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chaye echon v'yom echon, chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kari v'imeru, Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam u'amei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach, yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal, shmei dekudashah v'richu. Le'ela, li'ela, mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'yimeru, Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel.
Amen.
May the memories be a blessing. Well, Shana Tova, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for rolling with all the ways we have needed to connect and make the connections through whatever waves we're making them through right now. It's a joy to be here and be with all of you, even though I can't see you and don't know exactly who's there, but I can feel you. And it's really a joy to be with Margie and Eileen, to be making music and prayer together collectively. So thank you. And thank you, Rachel, again, for making this happen, and everyone behind the scenes, and our Rose City sound guys, and everyone who's really made this happen. We will have more announcements as the holidays go, more tomorrow. But for now, we will be gathering again tomorrow morning at 9:30 for our Rosh Hashanah morning service. Closing songs, I turn back to Eileen and Margie.
Olam chesed yibane, ya la 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 la. Olam chesed yibane, ya la 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 la. Olam chesed yibane, ya la 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 la. Olam chesed yibane, ya la 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 la. I will build this world from love, ya la 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 la. And you must build this world from love, ya la 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 la. And if we build this world from love, ya la 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 la. ya la 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 la. Olam chesed yibane, ya la 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 la. Olam chesed yibane, ya la 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 la. Olam chesed yibane, ya la 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 la, ya la la la.
Amen. 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 May we build this world from love. May we each know joy in these days of turning and returning. May we each feel ourselves even slightly closer to home within ourselves, within our lives, within our communities, within our world. And may there be great joy in that. And may we each discern the way right now in which we can build this world from love, to build our families from love, to build our communities from love, to build this world from love. May it be a blessing for us, for all Klal Yisrael, for all who dwell on earth. And we say, Amen.
Amen.
Shana Tova, everyone. Have an easy night.